Prince William is reportedly formulating a plan to finally strip Prince Harry and Meghan Markle of their HRH titles. Markle is still using her HRH title despite agreeing to drop the title when the Sussexes left royal duties. How is Will planning to deal with this?
Inside Westminster, where the air itself seems saturated with centuries of statecraft, something unusual had begun to stir. Those who walk the old stone corridors of Parliament, corridors that have witnessed civil wars, abdications, and the births and deaths of empires, felt a shift, subtle at first, then unmistakable. A murmur threaded through the House of Lords, a whisper that something unprecedented was gathering momentum behind the scenes. And then, in one quiet but consequential moment, the murmur became real. A formal petition was entered into the record, handwritten, steeped in constitutional gravity and unmistakably serious in its intention. Its purpose was stark. Its aim was unambiguous. It sought to strip Meghan Markle permanently of the title Duchess of Sussex. This, insiders stressed, was not rumor. It was not speculation stirred by tabloids or internet sleuths. This was the machinery of the British state itself making a move, and it spoke loudly simply by existing. Within the walls of the upper chamber, senior peers described the event as the most extraordinary turn since the chaotic aftermath of Megxit. Many had long felt frustration simmering beneath the surface, but a threshold had now been crossed, and Parliament was no longer content to remain an observer. The petition marked something more profound than political annoyance. It signified that what once appeared a family feud had evolved into a matter of constitutional concern. What triggered such a dramatic escalation occurred thousands of miles away from the ancient halls of Westminster. It happened in Nigeria. What the public saw as a private goodwill trip carried unmistakable echoes of an official royal engagement. Meghan appeared beside Prince Harry in traditional dress, delivering polished speeches, meeting senior military figures, and accepting tributes that, under normal circumstances, require coordination with either the palace or the Foreign Office. But according to high-level parliamentary sources, no such coordination had taken place. Not a single government department had been notified. The trip unfolded as if the Sussexes still operated within the framework of working royals, a framework they had abandoned years earlier. To members of the House of Lords, this was more than questionable judgment. It was dangerous. Behind closed doors, the language was crisp, severe, and alarmed. Unauthorized diplomatic posturing, a breach of constitutional expectations, a risk to the neutrality of the crown. Photographs circulated globally, showing Meghan with Nigerian officials, creating an impression that she had the authority to represent the monarchy. The optics were enough to provoke concern among those responsible for safeguarding constitutional boundaries. The Nigeria trip did not merely irritate the establishment. It activated it. And once activated, Parliament did not stop with diplomatic concerns. It turned toward law. Royal titles, often dismissed by the public as ceremonial relics, have legal weight. They are bound by the Royal Titles Act of 1917, created in the shadow of global conflict to prevent royal identities from being exploited for personal gain. As legal experts, those who advise ministers rather than press outlets, reviewed Meghan's public actions, they began arguing that her continued use of the Duchess title, paired with her media ventures, risked breaching the act. Documentary credits featuring her title, corporate filings leaning heavily on Sussex, and international publicity materials all became ammunition for those who believed a line had been crossed. For Parliament, especially the Lords who guard constitutional tradition, this was the critical pivot point. When legal compliance enters the conversation, etiquette becomes irrelevant. It transforms a social controversy into a statutory question. And statutory questions demand action. The review went deeper. Corporate filings from Archwell, the Netflix partnership, and global media deals appeared, according to the petition's authors, to use the Sussex titles not as courtesy labels but as brand assets. The Netflix documentary opening frame, The Duke and Duchess of Sussex, was repeatedly cited as an example of commercializing noble identity. The attempted global trademark of Sussex Royal, blocked only by the late Queen Elizabeth herself, was included as proof of intentional monetization. In the eyes of the petition supporters, Royalty had been transformed into a business model. And business models, when built upon noble designations, force Parliament to respond. In the Lord's view, this was not ambition, it was transformation. A duchess becoming a global entertainment figure powered by a title she no longer served was, to them, a constitutional distortion. Centuries-old rules regarding royal communications, rules designed to maintain neutrality, dignity, and clarity, were repeatedly referenced. Meghan's podcast Archetypes was cited as a particular breach, discussing royal family dynamics, making allegations that traveled worldwide, and creating headlines that the palace could not publicly counter without violating its own traditions. By the time a YouGov poll revealed that 77% of the British public supported removing Meghan's title, and 61% supported removing Harry's, Parliament felt not just justified but mandated. Public opinion had shifted decisively, and public pressure carries weight inside Westminster. That poll, insiders say, was the final catalyst. It suggested that the title no longer reflected service or duty. To many, it reflected celebrity, commercial ventures, and grievance-driven publicity. And so, in the oldest legislative chamber in the world, beneath soaring beams and ancient lamps, a petition was laid down. A petition that could reshape the monarchy's relationship with its titles for the first time in modern history. A petition that might erase the Duchess of Sussex from the constitutional record, not by choice but by law. The whisper had grown into a declaration, and the declaration had taken physical form. The petition resting within the House of Lords was more than paper and ink. It was the beginning of a process that, if advanced, could set off the most dramatic constitutional confrontation involving a royal title in generations. Meghan Markle's future as Duchess of Sussex no longer depended on public relations, palace statements, or personal interviews. It now rested in the hands of Britain's oldest parliamentary chamber, an institution that moves slowly, deliberately, and with historical memory stretching back nearly 1,000 years. The Lords have always seen themselves as guardians of continuity, protectors of the fine line that separates monarchy from politics and politics from celebrity. In their view, the chaos of modern media, global platforms, and Hollywood deals threatens to erode boundaries that must remain intact for the constitutional monarchy to function. And so, as peers gathered privately in committees and reading rooms lined with leather-bound volumes, they examined the Sussex situation as something far larger than a dispute between individuals. They saw it as a crossroads, either enforce traditional limits on titles or allow those limits to collapse under modern pressures. What troubled them most, according to those with knowledge of the discussion, was not Meghan's fame nor even her criticisms of the royal family. It was the perception that she had used her Duchess title, legally granted and constitutionally protected, as a vehicle for international positioning. The Nigeria visit became the emblem of this concern. To the Lords, it symbolized exactly what their predecessors feared when drafting the Royal Titles Act over a century ago. A scenario in which a title holder acts independently on the world stage, without authorization, yet carrying the implied endorsement of the crown. This fear was sharpened by the Sussexes' long-term media strategy. Their partnership with Netflix, featuring a documentary framed around their royal identities, was repeatedly cited as evidence of branding rather than storytelling. Corporate filings for Archewell bore similar scrutiny. Trademark attempts for Sussex Royal, halted only by Queen Elizabeth herself, were considered a red flag. Each of these moments, when viewed collectively, formed a picture, a duchess leveraging royal identity in ways that Parliament believed strayed beyond custom, propriety, and law. But the Lords did not look solely backward. They looked forward and saw risk. Royal titles, if used as commercial or political tools, could destabilize the monarchy's apolitical status. If international trips undertaken by non-working royals could be mistaken for official diplomacy, the UK's foreign relations could be compromised. And if public grievances expressed through media channels were amplified globally under a duchess banner, the monarchy's silence, its traditional shield, could become a weakness. All these concerns converged into a new and startling question. Should Parliament, for the first time in the modern era, use statutory authority to revoke a royal title? This was not a question asked lightly. Historically, titles have been relinquished voluntarily or modified through royal prerogative. But parliamentary removal is a rare, almost unthinkable act, a constitutional earthquake. Yet the petition forced the Lords to examine precedents, legal interpretations, and the limits of royal autonomy. In doing so, they found themselves confronting a reality that few in the institution had expected: the possibility that royal tradition alone could not regulate the modern media landscape. The YouGov poll added weight, transforming elite concerns into what supporters called a democratic mandate. When 77% of the public expressed support for removing Meghan's title, peers saw in those numbers both permission and obligation. Parliament does not operate by polling, but it does not ignore sentiment strong enough to shake confidence in the monarchy's symbolic foundations. Public opinion becomes political momentum, and political momentum becomes constitutional action. In private discussions, several lords reportedly emphasized a key principle: a title without duty becomes a product, and a monarchy without protected symbols becomes vulnerable. They feared that allowing a duchess living outside the UK, absent from royal service, and deeply involved in commercial media projects to retain a title unchanged would set a precedent difficult to contain. Others stressed the risk of international confusion. Foreign governments might misinterpret future unofficial trips as semi-official engagements, especially when undertaken by someone still bearing a formal royal identity. As debate stretched on, a stark choice emerged: either allow the Duchess of Sussex title to remain untouched despite mounting concerns, or initiate the first step toward revocation. The petition provided the mechanism. What it lacked was the final political will to transform itself from proposal into law. Yet even that began to shift. With each headline, each documentary announcement, and each public controversy surrounding the Sussexes, more peers reportedly warmed to the idea that the monarchy's symbolic integrity required decisive action. The issue transcended personalities. It became, to them, about protecting the monarchy's future from the destabilizing pressures of modern celebrity culture. The palace, as it has throughout this saga, remained silent. Its refusal to engage, though traditional, left a vacuum one Parliament felt compelled to fill. And so the petition stayed alive, threading through committees, acquiring supporters quietly, almost silently, in the rituals of parliamentary procedure. Now the future of the Duchess of Sussex title stands suspended between eras. On one side lies tradition, where titles are hereditary privileges maintained through service and discretion. On the other lies transformation, where global celebrity reshapes public expectations and blurs constitutional lines. The Lords stand at this intersection, their decision carrying implications far beyond Meghan Markle herself. If the petition succeeds, it will mark a turning point in the monarchy's evolution, an assertion that titles cannot be reshaped by media narratives, personal branding, or international optics. It will signal that Parliament, when necessary, will intervene to enforce the boundaries between service and symbolism, between personal enterprise and constitutional identity. And so, with the petition resting in Westminster and the Duchess living an ocean away, the world waits, quietly, tensely, for the moment when Parliament chooses to move or chooses to remain still. Either path will reshape the story of the monarchy in the 21st century. Either path will redefine the line between celebrity and crown.